Hey, it's Alex. Just want to say sorry about the lighting in this video. The sun's been going in and out all day, so it looks a little bit strange, but it's a good video. Let's get to it. It's not us against the world. It's everyone versus everyone. Now, it's so easy to fall into the trap that everything revolves around us, where we are some kind of focal point, a locus, if you will, that has a higher importance than everyone else. But that modality of thinking is part of something called the main characters syndrome, where we simply treat everyone else as secondary characters to ourselves and don't take into consideration the fact that everyone else are main characters too. But because we're not in their experience and all we can see is this person, we are the focal point. We must be the center. Now that's simply not the case. And it's because of that mindset that it brings a huge amount of perspective-related issues relating to how we see the world, and especially in the manner that it's us against everyone. The truth is, the world doesn't treat you any different than it might treat somebody else. Now let me expand on what I mean by that. In the eyes of everyone else around you, you're simply just another person. But we overinflate our sense of self from the inside and think that we're more than that. The truth is that each of us is just another person in the sea of people, which actually kind of sucks to hear at first. Because we don't want to just be another person, we want to be the special one. We want to stick out. But if there's anything that I've found, is that upon making this distinction, only good things have come from that. One of the biggest ones is that people simply don't care about you as much as you think they do. Now this isn't in a bad way, like they don't care about you. But I'm talking about the things that you see as a big deal within yourself are simply little deals to everyone else. And you can easily prove this by looking at somebody else doing something that you would deem as a big deal if it happened to you, and watch the way that you react to it. From the outside, you see somebody going through something embarrassing, you go, okay. But from the other person's perspective, it can be an absolute hurricane of emotions and insecurity. And part of the reason for that is because that person doesn't see themselves as just another person, but they see themselves as the center of the universe. They somehow think that their inner reaction to something embarrassing happening must be congruent with the way that another person is going to react to it. And that's why it can feel so bad when those things happen. But to know that you're another person in the sea of people is actually liberating, because it means that you're not held up on this pedestal that you thought you were. So it is really liberating to know that it isn't you against the world, and the world doesn't hold this prejudice against you that you think it does. We create these hasty conclusions about what the world thinks of us because that is a function of the ego. It creates these stories to give ourselves a sense of who we are and where we belong in the context of other people, which is a core mechanism of survival and how to thrive in a social pack. But a lot of these times these conclusions are wrong and they are blown up out of proportion that doesn't take into consideration the fact that the degree of their reactivity simply doesn't match the way that you react to it. So you have to create almost a little bit of distance from yourself and look at the way that you're treating it internally and reframe it to be, actually, I'm reacting this way because of how I think other people are going to think. And if I can use my internal barometer of how I react to other people when they're doing something I deem embarrassing, and I know that was a bit of a mouthful, then I can recalibrate the way that I see my own issues in respect of that. And in that way, our issues aren't such a big deal anymore, and we haven't overinflated our importance. In a sense, broken free from the main character syndrome in that respect. So just being another person and not being special is actually fantastic for us, because it grants us a sense of reprieve that people don't care as much as we think they do. And we prove that to ourselves by looking at the way that we react to other people. Don't forget, all those other people think that they're main characters as well. And imagine if you saw the things that those other people were thinking about themselves. They'd probably be like, pfft. But all you're seeing is just like, oh, okay, that didn't look fun. But to that person, it might seem like their world is coming apart. So this is all about taking what I call an outside-in perspective rather than an inside-out perspective. By default, we take the inside-out perspective because all we can see is the world through ourselves, through our thoughts, through our emotions. And we think that the world must have something a heck of a lot more to do with our emotions and minds. But actually there's a serious disjoint between the two, because the mind especially creates conclusions based on slithers of interactions with other people and creates whole beliefs out of those interactions. Because it's very quick to think that it has things figured out, and it's like it becomes an internal law that we have to abide by within ourselves. Because something inside us has said, this is how it is. And now you're going to have to react to that as if it's true. And that way of thinking is a very, very reductionist viewpoint, because it puts us at the very center of the universe and takes on the flavor of the main character syndrome. But in reality, it's everyone versus everyone. And that would be taking on a viewpoint that is so much more realistic. But it's like we're scared to do that because we're scared of deflating our own sense of importance in the world. But if there's one thing I can promise you, it's that it actually gives you the opposite effect. Perhaps after the initial reaction of grieving the fact that you're not the center of the universe. To level up in this way, I think that's a necessary process, and that's temporary. And then once you've done that, it all gets so much better. Because you start seeing yourself from an outside-in perspective. You can start imagining yourself in the eyes of other people, which is one of the biggest game changers that I've ever experienced. Because it completely puts a blade through all of the stories that you told yourself that raise your sense of being the center of the universe. So this is something that you practice over and over every time that you find yourself being consumed by inner stories that drag you under and that seem so conclusive. We have to consider the fact that not only are these stories not reflective of us, but that other people don't really see them. They only see the way that you're reacting in real time to them. They don't see all of the inner stuff. Because a lot of these inner stories we tell ourselves are based on assumptions of what we think people think of us. But they just become too solidified and too concrete in the way that we view the world. And they create prisons within us. Because if we conform to their rules, and we think that they're correct and that we should be bowing down to them, then they put our reality in a little box where we can only operate within certain boundaries. And it's no way to live. And the way that you break out of those boxes, at least the way I did it, was reinforcing the outside-in perspective. I started devaluing all of these stories, and I took them off their pedestal by realizing that I'm just another person in the world, which meant they don't define me as well as I think they do. And they've just become a bit of a story that's become stuck on a loop and has been strengthened over time. But don't forget, as soon as somebody meets you, all they see is just a person in front of them. And if you can imagine taking their perspective, perhaps even whilst talking to them, it's like those stories just begin to break away a little bit, because you're aligning yourself to the present moment. You're aligning yourself to what's happening right now, and you're not allowing these strange mental echo chambers to take you down. So this is a perspective shift that I want to talk a lot more about in the future, because it's so groundbreaking. Because all the stories of my inside world have just lost traction in their pursuit to keep me in their prisons. So this is all about creating the distance between us and our inner narratives, and not letting them have the same power that they've had for a long time over us. And we do that through reinforcing the fact that we are just another person, and that we aren't the center of the universe, and other people simply just don't care as much as we think that they do. And we prove that to ourselves by looking at the way we react to other people. Again, this is a game changer, and I'm definitely going to be talking about this more in the future.